Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. I'm Michaela Klauser, Senior Director of Producer Education here at NCBA, and we're so glad to have you guys all here tonight with us. We have a great lineup of speakers. Before we get started, I have a couple housekeeping items. As a reminder, as a participant, your line will be muted, but please feel free to type in questions in the question box on your screen during the webinar, and at the end of the presentations, we will get to as many of those as time will allow. If you're having trouble with your technology or if you're joining us only for audio, the webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing in a few days at ncba.org. Just look for the producer tab or head to our YouTube channel for that. The webinar tonight, titled Biosecurity Manager, Whose Job Is This? Unravel the Mystery of Biosecurity Plans, will feature Kelly Oliver Hableeb. Kelly joined the Kansas Department of Agriculture in 2018 and currently serves as the Animal Health Planner, where she focuses on producer outreach and education. Kelly spends the majority of her time traveling across the state of Kansas, assisting producers with their enhanced biosecurity plans for their operations. She collaborates with industry organizations to continue to educate and advocate for foreign animal disease preparedness. Kelly leads a national work group for secure food supply coordinators across the nation to collaborate and gain consistency in secure food supply plan development. We also have Tanner Pickett with Five Rivers. Tanner started his career at Five Rivers Cattle Feeding in 2011. Here he served in various roles, starting as a management trainee and for the past 9 years as the general manager of 2 of the company's feedlots. He received his Master's of Business Administration from Colorado State University and a Bachelor of Science in Animal Science from Northwest Missouri State. Also with us, Dr. Molly Lee. Dr. Lee is an Associate Director for the Center for Food Security and Public Health at the Iowa State University of Veterinary Medicine. Prior to joining ISU CVM, she practiced mixed animal medicine in rural Kansas, primarily working with cow-calf operations in small feedlots. Dr. Lee's current focus is on veterinary educational capacity building, zoonotic disease prevention, biosecurity, foreign animal disease preparedness and response, and One Health. Also with us, Dr. Julia Herman. Dr. Herman serves as NCBA's beef cattle specialist veterinarian and consults on animal health and welfare, biosecurity, and foreign animal disease preparedness and other preventative medicine topics. She has spent time in rural veterinary practice in Kansas, teaching livestock medicine in the Colorado State University Veterinary Medicine Program, and currently leads educational development and veterinary outreach for the producer education team and BQA program. So with that, Kelly, I'm going to pass it off to you and we can go ahead and get started.
Perfect. How does that look?
That looks great.
Fantastic. Good evening. I'm Kelly Oliver Hableib, and I serve as the Animal Health Planner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about my role and experiences with the Secure Food Supply Program in our state. So my main responsibility is to assist producers from all the different sectors of the industry in writing and reviewing their secure food supply plans. So when a producer reaches out to me and says, I'm interested in a secure food supply plan, I try to get a date for us to meet on the calendar as soon as possible while it's fresh in their mind. The most common question I get is, how long is this going to take? And I ask for 2 hours of their time. Now, this time frame can vary, but consistently within 2 hours, we have a rough draft of your plan put together. I know producers are busy people and have important things to do, but we need to remember that this plan is important as well. So I try to be as efficient as possible with everyone's time. Now, I personally prefer to meet in person, as this is what I have found that usually works best for me and gives me an opportunity to meet the producer and see what their operation has on site to give me a better idea when we start building their plan. I always recommend to invite operation managers, their veterinarian if they're available, and anyone else on their leadership team that they would like to have there. When meeting with the operation, No matter who's in the room, I always start off with explaining what a secure food supply plan is, just to ensure what we are doing, just to ensure that they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because I have found that sometimes it's someone else, maybe their veterinarian, telling them they need to do this or have that enhanced biosecurity plan in place for their operation. So I don't want to assume that they know something. So I make sure everyone gets all of the background information that they need for us to get started on their plan. And as I'm having this conversation at the beginning, from my perspective, I will notice the producers in the meeting have one of these three mindsets. One is very tense, just not sure what to expect. Two, they have better things to do. And I'm sure their mile-long to-do list is running through their mind. That happens to everyone. Or three, full of curiosity. And that is when I get super excited because I'm thinking they're going to ask great questions. They're going to be engaged. It's going to be a fun conversation on a not so fun topic. But what I have realized is by the end of our conversation, once the plan is completed, everyone's mindset is now at number 3, full of curiosity, and their mind is just as creative as it can be in thinking outside the box. And I tell you that because it's completely okay to not know what to expect when getting started with your enhanced biosecurity plan. There are people in your state that can help you through this process. So getting started, as many of you already know, the Secure Food Supply Plan has 2 main components. One is a written portion of 11 questions that are operation specific, and the second part is building a map. This is where we get the aerial image and label where everything will be located when this plan is stood up. And we put a lot of our time into these maps because it's going to be your playbook when an outbreak occurs. It's going to tell you exactly where everything needs to be. So at the start of the outbreak, if you have a secure food supply plan already, this is one less thing you have to think about, which is why it's much easier to have a plan ready to go prior to an outbreak instead of trying to scramble to get one together during an outbreak. The greatest challenge when building a secure food supply plan that I have found is simply shifting that mindset, accepting the fact that you will have a new normal, understanding there will be lots of unknowns for a while, and your day-to-day operations and how you do business will be different. And during that time, things will change. The entire industry is going to have a new normal. You will not be shipping and receiving at the same volume. Your area of focus goes to adjusting rations and controlling potential fomites. And I promise you, after putting together a secure food supply plan, you will look at potential fomites in a whole different way. And producers ask me all the time. They say, Kelly, how long do we have to do this for? We can handle the changes for a few weeks, no problem. But if it's longer than that, we may need to do something different. And I will tell them, I wish I knew how long the outbreak would last, but I don't. And you need to be prepared for long term. This is where shifting that mindset comes in and you realize that you're not doing business at the same rate as you are today. So I want to share a few things with you based on my experience that I feel is important to keep in mind when you are either thinking about a secure food supply plan or maybe you already have one completed. One of the best things about producers is that they are some of the best problem solvers. Producers problem solve all day, every day. Those problem solving skills shine when we start discussing how we're going to get items on and off the operation safely. This is the part where I start to see that shift in that mindset from the beginning of our conversation to recognizing, yeah, this is going to be a problem. How do we make it work? Next, your enhanced biosecurity plan is only going to work if your entire team follows it. Now, I have to go back to those problem-solving skills. And the trick to putting your map together is to be creative. Every operation is laid out completely different. Some are much easier and straightforward than others. and some, to be honest, are just hard. So whoever initially laid out some of these operations did not have biosecurity in mind. And so you have to be creative and think outside of the box. The next item was a challenge for me personally, and that is you have to accept the fact that there is no such thing as a perfect plan. A plan that gets you at 0% risk does not exist. But every biosecurity measure that you put into place will certainly help reduce your level of risk. Every decision you make on this plan is a business decision surrounded by how much risk are you willing to take. And it's my job to help you identify those high risk areas and find the lower risk option to use in your plan. And as I mentioned earlier, you have to remember that you won't be operating exactly the same as you're operating today. For our cow-calf producers, your sector can be challenging. You utilize a lot of different pastures at different times of the year, and as you move cows around, it's impossible to know where they will be if an outbreak occurs. So what I like for our cow-calf producers to have is what I call pasture protocol. This is the biosecurity protocol that will be followed no matter what pasture is being utilized. In the Secure Food Supply Plan, it outlines that you need to be documenting training with your employees. As I mentioned before, this plan only works if everyone follows it. Your employees need to know when this plan is stood up because their normal routine has been changed. They're not going to be able to just drive into the operation and go wherever they need to. You need to show them exactly where they will need to park, how they get from the dirty side to the clean side, how nothing crosses the line of separation without being properly cleaned and disinfected. They need to be made aware of this plan and properly trained on it. And the absolute best thing that you can do once you have a plan is stand it up and test it. What looks good on paper may not actually work. And I would much rather know now something needs to be adjusted than during an outbreak. I highly recommend you reach out to your state Department of Agriculture if you need help getting your plan started. You can certainly put the plan together yourself or work with your veterinarian, but make sure your state either has a copy of your plan or is at least aware that you have a plan. Every state handles these secure food supply plans just a little bit different. Then lastly, keep your plan up to date. We know turnover happens, construction happens. So when you add on new pens or build a new feed mill or work with a new veterinarian, we want to make sure those changes have been made in your plan so it stays as relevant as possible. And then there are some resources out there for you to utilize when getting started. What I have shown on the screen is from what we call RAB app. It has taken the national template and made it into an electronic platform. RAB app also has a map builder that will assist you in building your map. States were needing ways to be more efficient to stay on top of all the secure food supply plans in their state. And so RAB app was a tool that was developed to assist with that. Another great resource, I'm sure many of you have been to the site, but securebeefsupply.org website has a lot of great guidance documents that were designed to help you through this process. There's also a page that lists the point of contact in a handful of states. So if you don't know who you need to contact in your state, they may be listed there, or you can certainly reach out and we can help point you in the right direction. And with that, I hope some of these items will help you find helpful as you get started with your secure beef supply plan. And thank you for your time this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. I am now going to pass it over to Tanner.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you good.
All right, perfect. Well, Kelly did a great job summing it up. I'm probably going to be a little bit redundant in the things that I say, which I think just drives this whole message home. So I'm the general manager for Five Rivers Secure Feed Yard located in Kersey, Colorado. And we recently, in the past few years, have kind of revamped our SBS plan here. Our process started back in 2019. and was largely pushed from our on-staff veterinarians when they kind of posed the question to us as general managers of could we maintain business continuity if something like this were to hit? How long could we survive a shutdown or a standstill? How long would it take us to get back operational? Because most of our feed yards are between 70 and 100,000 head capacity yards, and the amount of inbound and outbound traffic that occurs every single day is pretty significant on a yard this size. You're going to see inbound, outbound traffic somewhere between 50 and 100 semis a day, just bringing commodities and cattle in and out. And that doesn't even count the amount of contractors, parts, and things that come onto a site like this. Most of your feed yards are really in a fairly small footprint for as large as they are. So you have a lot of traffic that interwings and crosses paths a day. And so when we started this planning process, it was really with our vets and the kind of local management team here at the feed yard. And we kind of started with just the basics of what is FMD? What's it going to look like if this were to hit the U.S.? How fast can it spread? What's the real impact going to have on us and the industry? Because we have a lot of young managers coming into the workforce that are leaders and managers of these feed yards who didn't probably have the ag background that some of us did growing up. So FMD is not something that's really been in the headline topic for them yet in their career. So the education portion for us was extremely important. So really, we brought the team in, we set them down, and we just kind of talked about the basics, the what's, the whys, and what do we got to do to be prepared for this? Because if we close the gates, we have a lot of animals to take care of every single day. And so getting traffic in and out is crucial to us. So once we kind of had the management team on board from there, we actually hired a consultant, and she came on site, had a lot of experience creating SBS plans, because our goal was really to make a standardized format that we could use across all 13 facilities. Even though the layouts were different, we wanted a SBS plan that as people transfer, take promotions, work at other facilities, that the layout and the format of the SBS plan was easy to learn and could easily translate when you went to other facilities. And so Emily was a huge asset to the success of our plan because when we started, there was a lot of skepticism on will this work? When you work inside of a feed yard, as Kelly said, every day, you kind of get routine to everything is based on efficiency, in and out, get cattle fed, be consistent every single day. So all of us kind of had blinders on from an operation standpoint that there's no way this is going to work. The layout of the feed yard, we cannot create line of separations and still function. And so kind of having somebody like Emily or Kelly or your state officials or your veterinarians who are experienced with these plans to shine some insight to drive home that message that normal is not normal anymore, that you have to look at a way to create a new normal and a new plan and still get cattle fed and still get commodities in. And so you start erasing a lot of doubts and you kind of reprogram your mind to say, hey, I think we can do this. It's not going to be the most efficient, but it's how we have to do it. So that really started with using the tools and assets that are out there, Google Earth, putting maps and papers on plan, drawing lines, erasing lines, and kind of getting our line of separation created as we talked through all the different entry points and the points of contact where them trucks needed to go once they come on board. So once we kind of had the plan on paper, from that point, it really went to just reviewing the plan, taking groups out, walking through, saying, will this work? Do we have enough space? And trying to bring that plan to life. From that point, we felt like our plan on fourth or fifth iteration was pretty bulletproof. And that's when our vet challenged us to, can you do a live exercise? And can we set up line of separations and can we field test this and really operate a day's worth with this biosecurity plan implemented? So that phase got a little more complicated. From there, we took our plan and we broke up into small groups within the feed yard where you have your mill, your feed, your yard maintenance, and your cattle health guys. And we kind of one-on-one started back from the basics, explaining what this is, why we're creating a plan, what kind of impact this could have on us, and why a line of separation is extremely critical if this event were to happen. We wanted to educate them on what to expect, and we also wanted to put their mind at ease that this isn't the end of the world. We just want to be prepared so we can still function we can still have jobs and we can still take care of cattle if something were to break out. So once we had everybody kind of up to speed, educated on the plan, walked through, the next piece was bring it to life and set up the line of separations on the feed yard. And this is where it becomes pretty challenging. In the event of a crisis broke out, you're probably going to use anything you can find to create those lines of separation: hay bales, vehicles, barriers. We were fortunate enough to rent a whole bunch of road cones and basically set up those line of separations, put up barriers, put up strings, and made it real visual for the people that were going to come onto the feed yard that had not had a chance to review our plans. Because although you do get some commodity trucks and cattle truck drivers that are returners, when they pull in for the first time and the whole world has changed and the whole flow of traffic has changed, you have to have some sort of a kind of self-directed traffic flow. So whoever comes on, they only have one path to go down where they can't create those cross-contaminations line of separations. So we implemented that. The live mock exercise was in 2023, and we walked it out for an entire day. Overall, it was a pretty big success. But kind of going back to what Kelly said, is you got to get everybody on board. You have to kind of bring this plan to life, because it's pretty easy to mock up on paper or even draw it on Google Earth. But as you start creating these lines in real life, and you need turning radius for big trucks and semis in and out, you really understand how small your facility is. And so it was a real eye-opening experience for us. We invited state vets, industry partners, state regulators, other feed yard managers within the company, and some from competitor companies. And after that mock exercise was done, it opened up a lot of curiosity to questions and ideas and things that we hadn't thought about yet. And if this event were to go on longer than a few weeks or a few months, you have to start thinking about different seasons, drainage, and everything else that comes into play at a feed yard. So I would say biggest learning lessons from kind of being a biosecurity manager and starting a plan for your own facility is it's time consuming, it's challenging. You need to start early, and you need to start now, because once it starts creating one of these plans, it's going to be too late. It takes time, it takes revisions, and once you kind of have it on paper, you don't need to do a mock exercise, I wouldn't say, but you need to kind of go out and visually line out that line of separation to really bring that thing to life, to make sure that you have enough space and you have enough room and you have thought of everything. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you so much, Tanner. And just as a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and put those in the question box. And Molly, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen okay.
Yep, it looks great.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm really pleased to be able to speak to everyone tonight, and it was really good to hear from Kelly and Tanner. They had some great tips and information to share. As mentioned, I'm Dr. Molly Lee, a veterinarian at Iowa State University, and what I'll be talking about today is a project that we have to develop a toolkit for biosecurity managers. And so the idea of this toolkit being to really help with that effective and efficient implementation of biosecurity that is aligned with the secure food supply plans. So why is this needed? You probably either already know this or have kind of gathered from the first couple of presentations, but as a reminder, the biosecurity manager, as it's defined in the secure food supply plans, is really that very critical component in the development, training, and implementation of biosecurity on the farm. As our group has engaged with departments of agriculture across the country who've worked with farms on secure food supply plan preparedness, they've reported that training for biosecurity for both the biosecurity manager and other employees was a gap for a significant number of farms. The current secure food supply plan materials include information about the biosecurity manager's roles and responsibilities, and there's a ton of other resources. Many of them are really, really good, but a lot of time and in-depth reading is required to fully understand the content. And so if something is missed or isn't completed, personnel might be unaware of the full extent of the roles and responsibilities of this job. It's also particularly useful for turnover of farm personnel, personnel moving from different sites within an operation, and also the onboarding of individuals who assume the role of a biosecurity manager, but who might not have been involved in the creation of the farm's biosecurity plan initially. So we were hoping to solve some of these challenges by development of this toolkit. So who is it for? The biosecurity managers are livestock and poultry producers and employees responsible for implementing biosecurity aligned with the Secure Food Supply Plan. So that's your enhanced biosecurity plan. This includes new hires and Spanish-speaking farm personnel, and we include that because these resources in the toolkit will be translated to Spanish as well. As a reminder, this resource that we're developing, a toolkit, and I'll go into more details of what that looks like, but it will be applicable to multiple species. And so the Secure Food Supply plans are aligned wherever possible, and this toolkit isn't meant to be a very specific, detailed resource for each species. Rather, we'll be able to refer to different resources that are already available. And so the toolkit itself will be a multi-species resource with supplemental species-specific reference handouts. So what is this toolkit going to look like? And so I will give you full disclosure. It's currently in process of being drafted. And so I wished at one point that I had it finished to be able to share with this group, or at least kind of a snapshot of what it looks like so far. But I think it's actually a really good audience to be able to share where we're at right now. And as you'll hear at the end, we're open to feedback. We would love to have different reviewers take a look at what we have developed so far, where we think we're going, and get your feedback so that we can really present and make this the best content, the most useful resource that it can. But right now, as the content's currently drafted, these are the main categories. So some sections are learning about biosecurity, the role of the biosecurity manager, learning about foreign animal diseases, learning about the secure food supply plans, and again, those species-specific supplemental resources. And why those other categories start with learning about, that's because we are pointing you towards some other resources that exist. And so some of those are shown on the screen. So they might be the Secure Food Supply Plan websites. There's some good general resources if someone that comes on board who will be a biosecurity manager maybe isn't familiar with biosecurity at all, and it's helpful for them to start with that daily biosecurity plan. They could look at the BQA resources for that, or some of the courses that we have on our CFSPH website at Iowa State for helping to learn about biosecurity. There's lots of resources as well about foreign animal diseases, and so we will point you in this toolkit to some of those resources. The orange box there is really the meat of this toolkit, though. What is the role of the biosecurity manager? So this screenshot of the checklist should look familiar to many of you. Of course, one important item in the checklist is having that biosecurity manager, as well as the written plan, which those two are closely tied together. And so you can see on the screen kind of the description that comes straight from the Secure Food Supply Plan resources. And really the role of the biosecurity manager comes down to kind of 5 different key points. And I apologize, this is a little small, but the principles are to understand basic biosecurity principles and good husbandry practices, developing, updating, or revising a written site-specific enhanced biosecurity plan, training and documenting all personnel on the farm on biosecurity procedures and communicating those biosecurity measures with all individuals entering the site, ensuring biosecurity steps are followed daily and taking corrective action if biosecurity is not followed, and putting the enhanced biosecurity plan into action during a FAD outbreak. So that's really what it distills down to. And so the toolkit will go into a little more depth on each of those 5 items. So what will this look like and how will this information be delivered? The project will allow English and Spanish, as I mentioned, speaking biosecurity managers who are implementing biosecurity aligned with the secure food supply plans to have access to streamlined, user-friendly information that will help them prepare and prevent disease introduction and spread on their operations. So that end product toolkit will include easy reference guides for sourcing information about biosecurity outlined in the secure food supply plans. It will be available online and in a PDF form, and the online version, as well as links via QR codes in the PDF form, will have short, engaging training videos that highlight some key roles and responsibilities of the biosecurity manager. We'll be using some photos and film shot on farm sites for that. We'll also include things like active learning worksheets to guide and assess knowledge gain corresponding with that guide and some of the videos that are in the toolkit so that the biosecurity manager can use that in some of their training of personnel on the farm. And then some other tools as well, like memos, email templates for farm personnel awareness, a training checklist to ensure that the toolkit resources are comprehensively reviewed and so on. And so again, this is expanding to plenty of resources to help biosecurity managers, but to distill it down to the most important resource, it's that easy reference guide, all species, and that will be efficient, effective, and comprehensive. So really ensure the biosecurity manager has the tools they need to effectively perform this role. So where will you find this information? As I mentioned, it's not available quite yet. It's still in draft form, but we will place this on each secure food supply plan web page. And so you'll be able to find that by going to the commodity. So for this group, the Secure Beef Supply Plan website. We'll also be sure to promote it through different commodity groups, producer associations, state departments of animal health, extension, really anybody that we can get to share this information with producers, we will try to support that. And so right now at this point, our target date, again, I put a little asterisk just in case anything happens, but late summer and early fall 2025 is when we hope to have these resources available on those websites, again, in English and in Spanish. So as I mentioned, we're seeking reviewers. We're kind of in stage 1 of our review right now, and it's a perfect time to add additional people who would be interested in taking a look at this. And so feel free to email me, or if you find the contact forms on the Secure Food Supply Plan websites, that'll eventually, those people will be able to find me as well if I don't receive them directly. So I think we'll do questions together at the end, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody and share a little bit about our toolkit that we're developing. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Lee. And Dr. Herman, I'm going to go ahead and give you control.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julia Herman. I'm the veterinarian here on the BQA and producer education team. And I just want to thank all of our presenters so far. I just love how they build on each other and how the messages, you know, it's the same regardless of the history of and the experience of the speaker. We all have very similar topics that we're talking about in this space. So thank you to all of them. I'm just going to provide you with some of the resources that our team or our project has been pushing out for the Secure Beef Supply Plan. So we were fortunate, NCBA was fortunate to receive a USDA NABPREP, National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program grant to improve education and outreach to U.S. beef producers, veterinarians, and transporters about the Secure Beef Supply Plan to further industry collaboration, prevention, and preparedness for foot and mouth disease. We're grateful to have this funding to really provide resources to the people on the ground who are doing the work. So for those of you who haven't looked at this or have seen this before, we do have a one-pager about all the new resources that we have created in this project that's been going on for about 1.5 years now. So on ncba.org, under the producers tab, you can find this. Some of the resources that we have include what to expect in a national movement standstill. Both Kelly and Tanner talked about how long can you last if you can't move out of your operation. This talks a little bit about the logistics behind that. Premises identification, what is needed and how is it used? Each secure beef supply plan will need a premises ID to build, or well, to have on the plan, but also in case we need, or in case they need movement permits during an outbreak. We also have a secure beef supply enhanced biosecurity supply list. So if your operation wants to start preparing in case you need to, preparing to put enhanced biosecurity in place, this has a list of different things that you can utilize or have in storage. Contingency planning. Contingency planning is really important for our producers, but it's also really important to other pieces of our industry, including the haulers and the transporting industry. We had a great webinar last week talking about the transportation industry and how important they are in everyday activities, but also how important it's going to be during an outbreak. So great resources for haulers and transporters. We also have one for enhanced biosecurity steps that haulers and transporters can start implementing now, or start thinking about now if they haven't already. We are utilizing some Iowa State resources in this, not reinventing the wheel. All of our resources are available on the Secure Beef Supply website, which both Kelly and Molly showed already. And the other thing to think about is from that daily biosecurity aspect, we have that daily biosecurity plan on the BQA page, but BQA and Secure Beef Supply have teamed up over the past couple of years to make sure all of our information is consistent across both websites. So whether you go to the BQA website or the SBS website, you're gonna be able to find the information that you need. This is the last in a series of 4 webinars that we have done on for this Secure Beef Supply project. We started with building a more resilient cow herd for the cow-calf industry that has gotten a lot of good views. Then we went to managing risk takes a team. That is focused on the stocker industry. So trying to hit the sectors for biosecurity planning that historically haven't had a lot of specific resources for them. Delivering excellence with every cattle movement is for our transporters. So go to the NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman YouTube website. You can find all of those webinar series. We also had a Cattleman to Cattleman episode back in October. I should put the year on that, 2024, that talked about biosecurity, our project, what it would mean to the cattle industry if foot and mouth disease comes into the country. So take a look at that. And this brings us to why biosecurity is so important. So the Secure Beef Supply Plan provides resources to protect your herd in control areas that are affected by movement restrictions, but not infected with FMD. So you can maintain your disease or your supply chain integrity. Everybody in the cattle industry, from ranchers to feedlot operators to transporters and packers, will rely on these cattle movements to provide that quality beef to grocers and consumers during this outbreak. And the SBS plan provides guidance for moving the cattle that have no evidence of FMD infection. This makes sure that we're taking those animals to harvest and to protect other premises, to make sure that we are minimizing lost income across sectors of the entire beef industry. As Kelly said, this is not going to be normal during an outbreak, and we just need to take some responsibility now and be proactive in planning before a foot and mouth disease outbreak gets here. Part of our project was we have been doing a number of train the trainers across the country, and so every state that's on this map that is colored in, we have a trainer in that state who can help you fill out your biosecurity plan, your enhanced biosecurity plan. So please email us if you want help filling that out. we can connect you with somebody to help fill out your plan and start that process. So you can email us at producered@beef.org, or you can email me directly. But that is all I have. We're gonna, which slide do you want me to leave up, Michaela?
We'll go ahead and leave this one up since your contact information and then the
Okay.
Secure Beef Supply website and BQA is up.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna start with Kelly. First of all, I can't thank you three enough. I love biosecurity, and I realize that's a specialty of mine, but I think what you all presented was so great to so many people. So Kelly, you talked about, you walked us through how to set up an enhanced biosecurity plan. When you are going through these plans with your producers and operations, what does the daily biosecurity discussion come into it? Because you can't have enhanced biosecurity without daily biosecurity. So what are some different things that your producers have talked to you about from like a daily aspect that they say, oh, we're going to change this, or this is something we want to improve upon?
Yeah, great question. So what I have noticed is when I ask about those daily biosecurity practices, they kind of feel like maybe they don't do biosecurity, but they do, whether they want to realize it or not. And it can be as simple as having designated operation shoes, clothing, gloves, outerwear, things like that that you just naturally do, but you probably don't think of that as biosecurity. But when you put your plan together, it's going to be an important part of that. Some of the other things that we talk about are vehicles. You know, you're going to need to still live your life and go to town and, you know, go to the school, go to the store, those kinds of things. So how do we not bring something back into the operation? And those are just kind of the main ideas that we toss around, but most of the time our producers are already doing biosecurity, whether they want to think of it like that or not.
No, that's such a great comment, because I do think there's a lot of things we do on a daily basis that it's second nature to us. And to actually like sit down and think intentionally about this is sometimes difficult, but you're right. Like, we're already doing a number of these things. It's just how do we think about it more intensely and be more intentional with those steps? That question kind of piggybacks onto a question I got for Tanner. So in your exercise that you guys did at your feedlot, did you include commodity trucks or cattle coming and going during your exercise? And how did that work?
Yeah, we did. So probably a key to the success is a lot of signage, alerting people that as soon as they pull in the gate, most of your feed yards have kind of a central entrance point. And so for that exercise, we actually put up signage saying this was a mock exercise, and then a lot of arrow traffic with commodity flow. If you're a cattle truck, you take this lane. If you're a commodity truck, you take this lane, and really incorporate the line of separation to back to where that truck only had one option where to go. So he pulled in the gate, he crossed the scale, more signage there. He was met with a scale clerk that signed him in, explained what he was going to do, where he was going to go, and then had a drawn map to say, once you leave the scale, here's your path of travel. So that making it very visual for drivers. I think, as was mentioned, of some speak English, some speak Spanish, and you got to accommodate both of those. And so when you're creating the signage to put up, you got to keep that in mind. And then visual always helps to where somebody sees exactly where they're headed. So the commodity trucks was honestly pretty easy, just by landlocking them with barriers of there's only one route to go and follow the arrows. The cattle trucks themselves, a little more challenging, because as you bring the cattle in, and specifically that day, all we were doing was arriving new cattle into the feed yard. So basically, once they backed up, they had access to get out of their truck, get into the pot, and start unloading cattle. But then there was a visual barrier of line of separation to where once the cattle came out of the truck, they physically could not cross the line to get onto the clean area as we had it designated.
That's fantastic. I think it's really great to have them have those drivers understand what would happen and what they would be required to do. So that's a great example. Thanks, Tanner. Um, Molly, you talked about all the other different secure food supply plans that are out there. So it's all of the barnyard. So that's what we talk about. Beef, dairy, pork, sheep, poultry. When you're working or answering questions with some of these producers as in the biosecurity manager discussion, what about those operations that have multiple species? I mean, our livestock producers don't generally just have one species, it's multiple. So what are some tips when people are thinking about that as they're building their biosecurity plan?
Yeah, that's a great question, Julia. So you're right. It's very different from operation to operation, and that is true whether you are a backyard operation with a couple cows and that's it, or a large feedlot. And it's also different if you have one species or another or multiple species on the same farm. And so that's really the importance of creating something that's customized for you. And so those biosecurity principles that are outlined in the checklist and the secure food supply plans are meant to be general enough to be able to apply to whatever species you have. But you'll need to be a little bit creative when you're looking at where do you draw your line of separation on your premises. Are some of your animals housed indoors? And maybe that will make it so that they can have their own line of separation, essentially, to be able to have a second kind of barrier for preventing that disease spread. And so that's really my biggest tip, is to just make sure that you are understanding the principles. And I think that's a really important role of the biosecurity manager, is to not only understand what needs to be done, and sometimes we run into some challenges when one biosecurity manager might look at another operation and think, oh, I have to do it this way. Really, as long as you understand the principle and the kind of core requirement behind that checklist item, there are multiple ways to meet that. And so that's really the most important key point I can suggest when you have those multiple species, because they sometimes are a little bit more challenging, and in some cases can be a higher risk, particularly if you have then multiple diseases that you might be susceptible to on your farm: foot and mouth disease, African swine fever, avian influenza, and so on.
That's great. Yeah, and avian influenza was the one that I was thinking about as you were talking, like with multiple species, because we have seen it hit a number of species. So thank you for those tips. Kelly, we're going to bounce back to you. What are 2 resources that you find are most helpful when you're working with producers and starting these plans?
So I think one of the most helpful resources is something as simple as Google Earth, so that we can look at a whole aerial picture of the operation and walk through it together of, this road we can drive down, or this one, no, we can't. Or we can really brainstorm together kind of the flow of what it would look like once those lines of separations are stood up. So I think using something like Google Earth is a huge help, and it's something I use with all of our producers. Another resource that I find helpful is, honestly, those handouts, think like the visitor log, the training logs, all of those documents that you can find on the Secure Beef Supply website, so that the producer doesn't have to go make it. So it's already translated in English and Spanish. They just have to hit print or replicate the document, and it's ready to go. So those are 2 things that I find very helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that Google Earth or any of those apps that you can see that visual view or that aerial view. We have that in our premises, we have our building a premises map video that's on the BQA website, but it's also referenced on the Secure Beef Supply website to help people walk through that process. Tanner, what are what are some aha moments that you had when you were doing the exercise?
I think probably the first one is just the whole mind shift of this isn't possible to, oh, this isn't that complicated. And that's so I think working with somebody that has experience in building these plans, they really pull you out of the operation mindset of what happens day to day to a 30,000 foot level, to once you say, though, there's no way that'll work, I can't go that direction, and they draw a line in Google Earth and say, what about that? And then it comes to you like, this isn't that complicated. It seems overwhelming at first, but once you really kind of recalibrate your mind, a lot of it is a lot easier than what you anticipate when you're going into it. I think that was probably the big one. And then the other one is kind of what I mentioned of just how tight and close quarters the feed yards are and how much real space you need to create these line of separations. It's easy to draw a line and say traffic goes this way, traffic goes that way. But when you take the turn-in radius of feed trucks and semis and you go out there and really stage it out, it brings to perspective how much space you really need to kind of create two paths to never cross.
Oh, those are great tips. I went to another feedlot exercise with one of your partner yards, and that was what they said when they went to do the actual exercise. They completely changed their route on part of the feed yard because it didn't make sense. And so, yeah, like recognizing what's practical, but then also what's going to make it as the least amount of stress as possible during a stressful time. So great tips. Molly, I'm gonna ask you this one, and then I'm also gonna add to it. But what do you suggest for ensuring biosecurity when you have other outside ranchers come in with horses for brandings and shipping days?
Yeah, good question. So remember, this will be, as other presenters have mentioned earlier, enhanced biosecurity during a foreign animal disease outbreak will result in a situation that is not business as usual. And so that'll be necessary. You probably won't be having some of these high risk activities. You're going to have to think on your feet and figure out what absolutely needs to happen and what can be done maybe in a different way and what doesn't need to happen at all. And so one resource, as a little bit of a side note, that's on the Secure Beef Supply Plan website is some contingency planning documents and kind of checklists and resources to help producers think through how often does this happen on my operation and how long could I go without it happening? What are some alternatives? So back to your question for tips on making these activities more biosecure. I think that, again, kind of echoing what Tanner was just saying, you might not do it the same as you usually do. The route that you pick, as you were just mentioning, Julia, for something on a day-to-day basis, if you're thinking about how to do it in a more biosecure way, you might realize there's a different way to do this. Maybe you can hold it in a different location. Maybe there's a way that you can consider your operation part of it to be off farm for a period of time, and then following certain biosecurity practices, it becomes then on farm later after becoming cleaned and disinfected again. So it really, again, is so dependent on the specifics of the operation and what that flow looks like of inputs and outputs. But animals are high risk, so you can't C&D an animal to be able to have it cross that line of separation. But you can do that with different practices with your equipment. You can make this more biosecure by some of the clothing and the boots and the practices that your personnel follow. And so really trying to think creatively about how you might change what you do normally to make it more biosecure is really the way to go.
Yeah, that creativity definitely comes into account when during an outbreak, and even I mean, the example that I've talked to some people about, when I got to go to Uganda and study foot and mouth disease, and we were in one of the active outbreaks. It was Farm A. Well, it was Farm B, but Farm A had sick cattle, so Farm B and Farm C went and helped Farm A to help with their sick cattle. They ended up taking foot and mouth disease back to their farms. And it made me think about how our cattle industry is so community oriented. So we do, you do go and help your neighbor when, during branding, during calving, something like that. So how do we implement that on a daily basis? Not just during a foot and mouth disease outbreak. So some of the things I think about with your basic biosecurity principles that Molly talked about, cleaning that equipment. So making sure that we are, maybe we're cleaning the trailers to make sure we're not bringing a bunch of organic matter onto that new farm. Maybe it's cleaning it just as something as simple as cleaning out the horse's hooves before they come in, rinsing them down. Make sure your tack is not shared between farms. There's some basic biosecurity things that we can go between farms to try to minimize that risk. But I think one of the other big things, and all three presenters talked about this, is training. So when you have those people coming in to help you on a branding or processing day, you need to have a meeting at the very beginning and just set up the standards, set up those expectations at the very beginning, not just from a human safety standpoint, but from a biosecurity standpoint and animal handling standpoint. I think that's really important. And I think we can't assume that everybody knows what to do, because every operation is going to be different. So I think it's some responsibility on the home place to have that training and teamwork meeting at the beginning. I'm going to end with one more question that I think I'm just going to ask to all three of you, honestly. So as a small farmer feeder, or even a smaller operator, maybe it's that person with less than 50 head, or they're feeding out their own steers and they're feeding out their own steers to sell. Where would you give one or two tips on what you would recommend that producer reach out to, or where should they go, or where would you go? I'll start with Kelly.
Where they should go to get help with their plan? Is that the question?
Yes. Where should they start? Where should they just start?
Yeah. Honestly, those smaller operators, in my opinion, are probably a little more complicated and probably a little bit of a higher risk, because you share a lot of things. It's you doing everything on the operation. And so there's just a little bit of a higher risk there. But, reach out to your state. See if they have somebody that can help you. Some states are utilizing local extension as well. So I think that there are some resources out there to help those smaller operators get started. I just think that don't feel like that just because you're small, it's not going to impact you. You're going to be greatly impacted, and you need a secure food supply plan as well.
Excellent. Molly, what about you? What do you think with some tips for these producers?
Yeah, I agree with what Kelly said. I think sometimes it comes back to being creative, but learning how you can implement the principle that really matters in a creative way. And so even your herd veterinarian can be a really good resource. I think there's been more familiarity over the years with secure food supply plans, but that's something small producers can always, share directly with their veterinarian and say, hey, I'm interested in the secure food supply plan, making an enhanced biosecurity plan for my farm. I know of the websites, but I really need some help applying this to my operation, and they can be a great resource for you.
That's awesome. I think, honestly, I'm going to end with that, because I think that's a great. Work with your extension, work with your state Department of Ag, your state vet's office, work with your herd veterinarian. All of those are great resources. I put the trainer near you map up, so please email us if you want help. And Thank you to all of our presenters today. We've had a great webinar series, and I appreciate you taking time. Happy spring, everybody. We'll talk to you later.